jurors, Henry? All the way down to that first one. Yep. That's following what I did. So you should be right here.
When you get to your seats, go ahead and be seated, folks. Welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, everybody may be seated. We have our jurors back. Welcome back, folks. Remember, they're all standing out of respect for you. So as soon as you go ahead and come into the courtroom, you can go ahead and find your seats. As promised, there is the notepad there. And you'll see there's no names on it, of course. There should be a number. So if you can just remember the number, it might be ideal. It's not required, of course, but if you just sit in the same seats, that way your notepad will just be right there in front of you, okay? All right, members of the jury, welcome back. Today's day one of the evidence. You might recall on Monday, we picked you, we swore you in, and I went over those pre-trial instructions. I explained how a trial will proceed. You might recall that the next step in the trial is going to be the opening statements by the attorneys. Let me remind you folks that the opening statements is an opportunity for the lawyers to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. But let me also remind you that what they say during the opening statements is not the actual evidence, okay? It's used, it's there to be a roadmap to guide you as you go through the trial. Okay, are both sides ready to proceed? Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, our procedure has the state go first. State, when you're ready, please begin.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court? Members of the jury. Rage. That was the defendant's answer. In this case, the evidence will show that on the morning of September 1st of 2023, the morning after the defendant stabbed his parents to death, after he led the Northport Police Department on a high-speed chase down and up I-75, after he ran through woods and swam through canals for almost 8 hours to avoid capture. The morning after, he sat in an interview room with detectives, and they asked him a question. What happened last night? What happened? Help us understand. And you'll hear that he answered with one word: rage. A rage that he described had been boiling until it reached the point the previous night where he decided to do it. As you've been instructed, Dima Tower, the defendant in this case, has been charged with 3 criminal offenses for his conduct on the night of August 31st of 2023. 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the murder of Robbie and Jennifer Tower, and 1 count of fleeing to elude law enforcement. In this trial, the state will prove to you that the defendant is guilty as charged by presenting evidence. In this trial, you'll hear evidence, and you'll see it in witness testimony, in physical exhibits, in video, in photographs, in the results of forensic testing, and in this case, you will also hear the defendant's own words. For the witness testimony, you'll hear from civilians. You'll hear from Jonna Walton. She was a neighbor on Malakote Road of the Towers. She knew them personally. They were friends. You'll hear how, on the night of August 31st, she was asleep in her bed. You'll hear how close to midnight she was woken up by sounds at the door, ringing, banging. You'll hear how she heard a woman's voice call out for help. And that voice was so desperate that she did not recognize it. You'll hear how she ran down the stairs, and a few moments later, she called law enforcement, 911, and you'll hear how she opened the door. No one was there, but she saw the blood. She saw stains of blood, and you'll see photographs of that blood, starting at her doorbell, going across the driveway, down, all the way to the tower home. You'll also hear from civilian Miss Melissa Snow. She was staff at a local preschool near the Lower Road exit of I-75 in Venice. You'll hear how she went to work that day, about 7:30, like normal, and there was lockdown because of the defendant at large in the area. You'll hear how she saw someone matching that description, and she notified law enforcement. And he was heading in the direction that about 30 minutes later, he was finally apprehended. You'll hear from Kay Rosas. She was a store clerk at the Shell gas station, where the defendant was ultimately arrested. You'll see the video of him going through that store, and you'll see him walking like it was any other day, like nothing had happened. You'll also hear from law enforcement witnesses in this trial. You'll hear from Officer Tyler Ragakis of the Northport Police Department. You'll hear how he was the first officer on scene at 1240 Mallicott Road, and he saw the defendant getting ready and getting in his car, and he called out to him. And you'll hear from his testimony, but you'll also see it in his dash cam footage. You'll see the defendant ignore him, get in his car, and speed away around another officer coming down the road. You'll see for about 30 minutes the defendant's driving. First, as he's speeding through the residential streets of Northport, running stop signs. At one point he goes, you'll see, down the opposite side of the road to try to get away from officers. You'll see when he merges on I-75, you'll see him drive around cars and speed towards Charlotte County until he turns around and goes back towards Venice. And you'll see where he finally abandons the car and takes off running into the woods, where he's able to avoid officers for that entire night up until the next morning. You'll hear testimony from Detective Cade Ryer. He was an officer at the time with the Venice Police Department. He was the one who went out to location where a sighting of a potential subject was called out near the Lower Road exit, and you'll hear how he happened to be checking the Shell gas station at the same time the defendant was walking in the back of the building, and they were able to make the arrest. You'll also hear from Corporal St. Jean. He was the lead detective assigned to this case in this investigation. You'll hear the steps of his investigation, identifying a suspect. And you'll hear how, after the defendant was arrested, he and another detective, Detective Chippendale, with the Northport Police Department, went to the police station in Venice to meet with the defendant, where they conducted an interview. That interview was video recorded, so you will hear in this trial the defendant's own words about what happened. You will hear that prior to that night, despite his parents being loving, the defendant was angry. Angry at life, that it was not turning out the way he expected. And that anger was building and boiling. You'll hear how that night was not the first time he thought about killing his parents. You'll hear how that day started out like any other normal day for him, that he went for a full shift at his job, came home, then went to his car and had a drink and began to think. You'll hear how that's when the thoughts came again. that he wasn't happy in killing his parents. You'll hear how he went back into the house, into his bedroom, and he continued to have that thought. And that's when he decided to do it. That's what he was going to do, and you'll hear this in the interview, that he was going to get it over with. You'll hear him describe as he walks to the kitchen, takes a knife out of the knife block, a steak knife, and he walks to the master bedroom. You'll hear how that day, that night, there was no argument. There was no confrontation. His parents were asleep in their bed. He walked into the bedroom, he went to his father's side of the bed, and he started to stab into the darkness. You'll hear him describe how he stabbed too many times that he couldn't even count. You'll hear the defendant say that the knife slipped away as he was stabbing. And you'll hear how losing the knife was not enough to stop him, that he walked back to the kitchen, grabbed a second knife out of the block, and walked back to the bedroom. And these are his own words, to finish what he started. You'll hear how, as he's stabbing his father tried to fight him off. But there was blood everywhere, and the defendant was too strong. You'll hear how his father, Robbie Tower, went to the living room to try to get away, and the defendant followed him and continued to stab until Robbie Tower died, collapsed on the carpet of the living room floor. You'll hear how the defendant's mother woke up while this was happening and tried to defend her husband, but she wasn't strong enough. You'll hear how after she was stabbed, she fled to the neighbor's house for help. And you'll hear how the defendant followed her and took her back inside. You'll hear how the defendant did not immediately finish killing her. You'll hear how he had things to say first. You'll hear how she sat on the couch while he stood over her, telling her those things. You'll hear how while she was on the couch, she cried and pled for her life. But the defendant didn't care. And when he was done, that's when he decided to finish killing her. You'll hear how he stabbed her again, over and over again, in her face and her neck. You'll hear how she didn't die on the couch. She was able to crawl away on the carpet looking for her husband. And you'll hear that's where she died, lying next to him. You'll hear how, when he was done, the defendant knew someone would have called the police and he had to move fast. So you'll hear how he made a series of calculated decisions after they were dead. You'll hear how he took the knife that he had and he cleaned it and he put it in the knife block. He cleaned himself off, he grabbed some belongings, and he went to his car to leave. You'll hear how he saw law enforcement get there. He heard the officer call out. And he didn't give a shit. Those are his words. You'll hear again how that night was not the first time he thought about hurting his parents. But that was the night that he decided to finally do it. And you'll hear motive. When detectives ask him, How could your rage get to that point? Help us understand what happened. He answered that he was fed up with this country and the bullshit that this country had to offer him. And his parents, they were a part of that. And he didn't like them as people anymore. And so he knew he would kill them. In this trial, you'll also hear from law enforcement witnesses that specialize in forensics and evidence collection. You'll hear from crime scene technician Elizabeth Walker. You'll see the photographs that she took and see the videos that she documented of 1240 Malacott Road and the surrounding houses that night. You'll see the signs of a violent struggle. You'll see the bedroom where the killing started and the bloody sheets, still wet when they were photographed. You'll see bloodstains going up to the ceiling, surrounding everything around the bed. You'll see the living room. You'll see the stains on the couch where Robbie and Jennifer Tower were. And you'll see their final resting place on the living room carpet. And you see the bloodstains going from the front door to the neighbor's house, the Jennifer Tower, trying to get help. You'll also see the knives that were collected that the defendant used to kill his parents. You'll also hear from crime scene technician Courtney Stender. She assisted with processing and documenting the vehicle that the defendant fled in and abandoned that night. And you'll see pictures of that vehicle. Next, you'll hear from Charlene Webster with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. You'll hear how she received the knives and blood samples from the Northport Police Department in evidence, and she performed testing on those samples. You'll hear about her procedures for doing that, and you'll hear how, at the conclusion of her testing, that Robbie and Jennifer Tower's blood, as well as the defendant's, were identified on the knives that he admitted to using. Lastly, you'll hear from Dr. Russell Vega. He's the chief medical examiner for the 12th Circuit. He examined the victims in the home where they died. He also performed formal autopsies in the medical examiner's office. Through his testimony and the pictures that you'll have to see, you will see the extent and the quantity of the stab wounds to Robbie and Jennifer Tower. The evidence will show that Robbie Tower had 68 penetrating wounds. Wounds to his scalp, his neck, shoulders, chest, his back, arms, and one of his legs. You'll hear that Robbie Tower had perforations of a carotid artery, larynx, and his left lung. You'll also see and hear that Jennifer Tower had 79 penetrating stab wounds, clustered over her scalp, her head, her back, her right shoulder, her chest and arms, and 38 stab wounds to her neck. You'll hear that she had perforations of her carotid artery, her internal jugular vein, and even her spinal cord. At the end of this trial, and the close of all the evidence, after the judge instructs you in the law, the state will ask you to render a verdict that aligns with three things: the evidence that you will be presented, the law, and your common sense. We will ask that you render a verdict that holds the defendant accountable and that you find the defendant guilty as charged. Thank you.
Defense, when you're ready.
Thank you. It has a lot to do with everything that I've been through, everything that I've seen. On the date that the state is talking about, Dima Tower was a few days short of his 22nd birthday. He had been in this country for approximately 7 to 8 years. He came from Ukraine, where he was in foster care prior to coming to this country. He was in foster care, you will hear, because his mother passed away when he was very young, and his family in Ukraine just didn't want to deal with him. So they put him in foster care in a country at war, where he was raised until two strangers picked him up and brought him to America. I'm basically a nobody coming from nowhere. That's what Mr. Tower said. This trial is going to be a little bit different. If you're expecting that I'm going to stand here and say that Mr. Tower is not guilty of anything, you would be incorrect. We talked during jury selection about different levels of murder and different levels of homicide.
Let's continue for a moment. Let's see if we can continue.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Gilman.
So the decision that you collectively, as a group and individually, will have to come to is whether or not Mr. Tower has the ability to fully form the...
It's difficult for, I think, us
Sure.
to hear. Let's take a short break. Members of the jury, can you please leave your notepads turned down here in the courtroom, writing implements on top. Don't discuss anything related to your jury service. You're going to get tired of these things, okay? Everybody please stand. Jurors exiting.
All right, jurors exiting.
Okay. Okay. You're there.
All right, we just, everybody may be seated. We just had, I just excused the jury. It got to the point where the defendant, in crying and using Kleenex, was disrupting the jury trial. Mr. Tower, I won't allow that to continue, so take a moment, compose yourself, and we'll get started in about 5 or so minutes, okay? We'll take a short break.
All rise. Court is in a brief recess.
Let's bring Mr. Tower in. Mr. Gilman, did you speak to him about his behavior?
I did.
Can I have each of you approach for a moment? All right, we have everybody back in the courtroom, including the defendant, Mr. Tower. Mr. Tower, we just had to take a break because of your behavior in the courtroom. You were showing emotion, crying, sobbing, using Kleenex. You were here when I spoke to the audience this morning, right, Mr. Tower? Okay. I spent time this morning, I thought you were in here, where I instructed those in the audience that they can't show emotion, that there are times during especially a murder trial where the emotion might be high, and that if they're unable to handle it, I need them to remove themselves from the courtroom. I will not allow the jury to be persuaded or interfered with by folks showing that emotion in the courtroom, okay? And that includes you, Mr. Tower. So you need to handle yourself accordingly. If you need to take a break because you feel that the emotion is too high and you're struggling, please bring it to Mr. Gilman's attention and we can take a break, okay? But we can't have any more outbursts like that in front of the jury. Do you understand, Mr. Tower? Anything else, Mr. Gilman, you wanted to add?
No, Your Honor.
State?
No, thank you.
Okay, are both sides ready to bring the jurors back in?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
You have your thoughts together where you were in your statement, Mr. Gilman?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, let's bring the jurors back in. All right, everybody may be seated. Welcome back, members of the jury. As soon as you're seated and situated, the defense will pick right back up where they left off on their opening statement. Let's give them a minute, Mr. Gilman.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, they're ready to go. You may continue.
We talked during jury selection a little bit about different levels of murder, right? First degree, second degree, manslaughter. You'll get instructions on all of these when the case is closed. I anticipate you will hear evidence that will be relevant to you about premeditation. And essentially, that's the question you're here to decide. I do not anticipate having to make a decision as to whether Mr. Tower did acts that endangered people's lives and ultimately ended them. He did. The question you're going to have to decide is what level of crime that is. At the end of the case, after you hear all of the evidence, what we would be asking is that you find Mr. Tower guilty of manslaughter for the deaths of both the victims in this case. You will hear instructions, you will hear evidence, you individually and collectively make that decision. So at the end of the case, again, I will ask you to do the same thing I'm asking you now. Keep an open mind, listen to the evidence, and find Mr. Tower guilty of a manslaughter. Thank you.
That concludes the opening statements. So there's the roadmap for the trial. Next, we move into the evidence portion of the trial. State, please call your first witness.
Yes, the state will call Ms. Jonna Walton.